Picture this. It is April 1962.
Okay.
And a famously brilliant Italian film director is sitting in his office at the legendary Cinecittà Studios in Rome.
Right, the massive Hollywood of Europe, basically.
Exactly. And he has this massive budget secured. Like, the sets are already constructed, just sprawling across the backlot. He has an all-star cast, including Marcello Mastroianni, sitting in their trailers just waiting for instructions.
But there's a catch, right?
A massive catch.
Yeah.
There is one tiny, terrifying problem. He has absolutely no idea what the movie is about.
Oh, man. Total, utter creative paralysis.
Completely.
I mean, at this point, he hasn't even figured out what his main character does for a living yet. The crew keeps asking questions about, wardrobe and lighting, and he is just making these vague gestures, hoping inspiration will somehow strike.
Yeah, and it doesn't. So he decides to give up. He sits down at his desk, and he starts drafting a letter of resignation to his producer, confessing that he has, quote, lost his film. He is ready to just pull the plug, face the financial ruin, and walk away entirely. But right as his pen is moving across the paper, a chief machinist from the crew knocks on the door and interrupts him.
Just the worst timing.
Right. They want him to come down to the set to raise a glass and toast the launch of the production.
Which is just, it's the ultimate nightmare for a creative mind. He's being asked to celebrate this massive, incredibly expensive illusion that he knows is completely hollow.
Exactly. So, humiliated and cornered, he goes down, he raises his glass to the crew, feeling the crushing weight of their expectations. He's trapped in a no-exit situation, basically. A director who doesn't know what movie to make.
Right.
And suddenly, he has an epiphany.
Right.
Right there, glass in hand, the sheer absurdity of his predicament sparks an idea. He will make a movie about this exact moment.
Yes.
A director who is completely blocked, surrounded by a chaotic circus of people demanding answers he just doesn't have.
Which, of course, becomes 812, widely considered one of the greatest films ever put to celluloid.
It is an unbelievable pivot. So today, you and I are diving deep into our sources to explore the mind of that director, Federico Fellini.
A maestro himself.
Yeah. And even if you haven't seen his films, you have absolutely felt his influence. I mean, we use the adjectives Fellinian or Felliniesque to describe anything extravagant or, fanciful, bizarre, or Baroque.
Yeah, his visual language is everywhere.
But the man behind the camera is even more fascinating than the words he inspired.
He really is. Because Fellini didn't just point a camera at actors, He actively blurred the boundaries between memory and dreams and reality.
Right.
He operated on this fundamental belief that human imagination, like our most bizarre dreams and hidden fantasies, is just as true, just as real as objective facts.
Which is such a wild way to look at the world. So the mission of this deep dive is to trace how a small-town kid who loved comic strips, drew caricatures, and literally dodged the military draft, somehow transformed into the undisputed maestro of modern cinema.
It's quite the journey.
It really is. We are going to explore his evolution from gritty post-war Italian neorealism to these spectacular dream-fueled masterpieces that literally reshaped our culture.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, so to understand how he got to that moment of creative paralysis in 1962, we have to start at the beginning. Where does the Fellini story actually take root?
Well, it begins in 1920 in a small town on the Adriatic Sea called Rimini. He was born to a bourgeois Catholic mother, Ida, and a father, Urbano, who came from a family of peasant farmers and worked as a traveling salesman.
So a bit of a class divide there.
Yeah, you have this interesting class friction in his background right from the start.
Right.
But the really crucial detail of his childhood wasn't his schooling. Actually, he despised school.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He racked up 67 absences in a single year.
Oh, my gosh. My parents would have grounded me into the next century for that. 67.
I know, right? Instead of studying, he was completely obsessed with American comic strips. He devoured things like Little Nemo and Happy Hooligan.
Happy Hooligan. Wow.
Yeah, and these weren't just, passing childhood fads for him. The mechanics of the comic strip, taking a mundane human feature or a situation and stretching it into this absurd, exaggerated caricature, that became the blueprint for his entire worldview.
Wait, I'm trying to square this. You have a Hollywood-level auteur pulling his cinematic vision from Sunday cartoons.
Literally, yes. Take the character of Gelsomina in his 1954 heartbreaking classic La Strada. Her visual design and her innocent, tragicomic physical mannerisms were directly inspired by Happy Hooligan.
No way.
Yeah. And decades later, his 1980 film City of Women was a direct homage to the dream logic of Little Nemo.
That is wild.
Right. Before Fellini was bending cinematic reality, he was training his brain to look at the world through the surreal, exaggerated lens of caricature.
So he was basically a 1930s meme creator who was just drawing for his dinner.
Yeah.
Because by 1939, he flees Rimini for Rome.
Right.
He enrolls in law school purely to appease his parents, but there is zero record of him ever attending a single class.
Yeah, he lives in this cheap, freezing pensionnat, practically starving, and tries to hustle his way through life by sketching funny portraits of people in cafes and restaurants.
And that hustle eventually lands him a steady job at a bi-weekly humor magazine called Marco.
Right, which was huge for him.
Massive. He starts writing a regular column called But Are You Listening? And this gig was really the determining moment of his young life.
How so?
Well, it provided steady pay, obviously, but more importantly, it surrounded him with seasoned gag writers and script writers. It really sharpened his ability to observe human absurdity.
Which is a skill he desperately needed because World War II breaks out, and Fellini wants absolutely no part of Mussolini's fascist military draft.
Yeah, he was not about that life.
Not at all. And imagine trying to dodge a draft today. We leave digital footprints everywhere. Fellini pulled this off through pure analog chaos.
So the luck this guy had is insane.
It really is. So in 1942, to secure a medical extension, he manages to get himself sent to Italian-occupied Libya,
Wait, on what grounds?
claiming he needs to work as a screenwriter for an emergency rewrite on a local film production.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right, but then Tripoli falls under siege by British forces while he is there. He barely makes it out, squeezing onto a German military plane flying to Sicily just as the city is collapsing.
Talk about cutting it close.
And that isn't even the wildest part of his escape. So he gets back to Italy, still trying to avoid being handed a rifle, when an Allied air raid over Bologna miraculously bombs the exact building housing his medical and draft records.
You cannot make this
The paperwork just vanishes into ash. He is officially off the grid. The universe literally erased his file.
Wow.
So he just hides out in his aunt's apartment in Rome until Mussolini falls in 1943.
And stepping out of that apartment into post-war Italy changes his trajectory entirely.
How so?
Well, Rome in 1944 is liberated by the Allies, but the city is economically devastated. I mean, people are starving. The infrastructure is gone. So Fellini goes back to the only survival skill he actually has.
The drawings?
Exactly. He and a friend open a storefront called the Funny Face Shop, making a living drawing caricatures for American GIs stationed in the city.
Oh, wow.
And that shop becomes the crucible for his film career, because Roberto Rossellini, the director who would become the father of Italian neorealism, just wanders into the shop one day.
Just off the street?
Yeah. Rossellini is working on a script that will eventually become the masterpiece Rome, Open City. And he knows Fellini has a reputation as a clever gag writer, so he hires him to contribute dialogue and humor.
Wait, I need to pause here because this feels like oil and water.
What do you mean?
Well, how does a guy who writes comedy sketches and draws funny portraits transition so seamlessly into the depressing, rubble-filled world of Italian neorealism?
Right. Well, we have to look at how neorealism actually functioned. It wasn't just a stylistic choice to be depressing, it was born out of extreme poverty.
Right, the war.
Yeah. The grand Italian film studios were destroyed or, being used as refugee camps. Directors like Rossellini had to film out in the bombed-out streets. They couldn't afford huge lighting rigs or professional actors, so they cast regular people off the street. It was raw, unpolished reality.
Okay, so where does a gag writer fit into that rubble?
Fellini brought a crucial element to Rossellini's grit, and that was the sense of the absurd. He understood that even in the darkest, most ruined environments, human beings are still ridiculous.
That's a good point.
Yeah, they still laugh, they still make foolish mistakes, they still dream. Fellini injected humanity and this forlorn melancholy into the stark realism.
Which is beautiful. But sadly, that melancholy wasn't just an artistic theory for him. During this period, he experiences an unimaginable personal tragedy that shadows the rest of his life.
Yeah, this is heartbreaking.
Back in 42, while writing for radio, he met an actress named Giulietta Messina. She was starring in a serial he wrote.
Yeah.
They fell in love, married, and in 1945, they welcomed a son, Pier Federico.
And just 11 days after he was born, the child died of encephalitis.
It was just a staggering, devastating blow.
Yeah, and they never had any other children. The silence left by that loss created a profound emotional crater in their lives.
You can really feel that shared grief woven into their collaborations later on. When Fellini eventually transitions from writing to directing his own films, he casts Giulietta as the lead in La Strada in 1954.
Right.
It is a grueling, physically demanding shoot. Julietta's performance is brilliant, radiating this wounded innocence, but the intense stress of the production, compounded by their unresolved trauma, it triggers Fellini's first severe bout of clinical depression.
He finds himself completely paralyzed by despair, which leads him to seek out Freudian psychoanalysis for the first time.
Which is a huge shift.
It is a vital turning point. His fascination with the human psyche, the subconscious, and the way we process trauma, it really begins to simmer beneath the surface of his work here.
And as Italy slowly recovers economically in the late 1950s, Fellini's camera shifts. He looks away from the poverty and the bombed-out streets of neorealism, and he points his lens squarely at the decadence and chaos of high society. Which brings us to 1960 and the birth of a global phenomenon, La Dolce Vita.
Oh, this movie. So the economic boom created something called the Hollywood on the Tiber phenomenon.
Hollywood on the Tiber.
Yeah. American studios realized it was incredibly cheap to film in Rome. So suddenly, you have massive stars pouring into the city. The Via Veneto becomes a frenzy of extravagant parties, desperate photographers, and just overwhelming wealth.
And Fellini just drank it all in, observing the chaos. He pulled from real, scandalous events happening around him.
Like what?
Well, he saw a famous incident where a Turkish dancer performed an impromptu striptease at a high society nightclub, and he just wrote it right into the film.
Amazing.
Also, back in 1956, he witnessed the giant statue of Christ being flown by helicopter over St. Peter's Square.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and that becomes the iconic, surreal opening sequence of the movie.
But getting the film made was a brutal war of attrition. His producer, Dino De Laurentiis, wanted a highly bankable American star to guarantee box office success. He pushed relentlessly for Paul Newman to play the lead role of the jaded journalist.
Paul Newman in La Dolce Vita, that would have been so different.
Totally different. But Fellini refused. He insisted on Marcello Mastroianni, who was relatively unknown internationally, but possessed this perfect, weary, sophisticated detachment.
I can't imagine anyone else in that role.
Same. And Fellini fought so hard that De Laurentiis ultimately washed his hands of the project and sold the rights to another publisher.
Thank goodness Fellini held his ground. La Dolce Vita shatters box office records, but it also triggers a level of public outrage that is hard to comprehend today.
Oh, it was wild.
Yeah. At an exclusive screening in Milan, an angry patron literally confronted Fellini and spat directly in his face.
Spat on him.
Yes. Right-wing conservatives in Parliament stood up and denounced the film as a danger to public morality. The Vatican's official press organ lobbied heavily to have it censored and banned.
Despite the venom, it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, though, fun fact, the head juror who awarded it was hissed and booed by the festival crowd. But the cultural impact was tectonic. I mean, there is a photographer character in the film who relentlessly chases celebrities, and his name is Paparazzo.
Wait, so that single character is the reason the word paparazzi entered the English language?
It is, yeah. He literally gave us the vocabulary for that entire cultural phenomenon.
That is wild. I mean, he basically documented or, maybe even invented our modern concept of toxic celebrity culture and reality TV decadence decades before the internet even existed.
Exactly, which points to why the film was so controversial.
Yeah.
If you watch it today, the outrage wasn't just about the sexual themes or the wild party scenes.
Right, it goes deeper.
It was a scathing indictment of modern emptiness. Fellini held up a mirror to a society that had completely lost its spiritual center. They had replaced meaning with superficial glamour, and when the establishment saw their own hollow reflection, it struck a massive, painful nerve.
That makes perfect sense. But the irony is that this massive, scandalous success breaks Fellini.
Yep.
The external noise, the relentless fame, the constant demands from critics, it forces him to look inward. And this brings us right back to our opening hook.
Right.
The creative block of 1962.
The Crisis of 812. And the title itself is a testament to his block. It literally refers to the number of films he had directed up to that point.
Because he couldn't even think of a title.
Exactly. He didn't even have a real title for the movie. He was completely adrift, unable to figure out how to follow up the biggest film in the world.
And this crisis leads to a profound psychological shift. In 1960, he meets a Jungian psychoanalyst named Dr. Ernst Bernhard.
Right.
And he moves away from traditional Freudian analysis and fully embraces Carl Jung.
He goes all in. He devours Jung's autobiography, begins consulting the I Ching for guidance, and starts keeping a meticulous, lavishly illustrated record of his dreams.
Oh, wow.
And then, in 1964, under the strict clinical supervision of his psychoanalyst, Fellini takes LSD.
Okay, I am really curious how that actually functioned for him. Was it just a symptom of the psychedelic 60s seeping into his brain and making everything weird, or did it serve a specific artistic purpose?
It actually served a profound purpose. Fellini described the LSD experience as a state where objects lost their normal, everyday significance.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, he said he was able to perceive perception itself. It stripped away his reliance on external, objective reality. Combined with the Jungian therapy, it gave him a structured language to articulate the subconscious.
Okay, explain that Jungian language a bit more. How does that change the way a movie works?
So Jung theorized the collective unconscious, this idea that humanity shares a hidden mental basement filled with universal symbols, archetypes, and fears.
Right.
Instead of writing a traditional plot where event A causes event B, Fellini realized a story could operate through associative logic, much like a dream. Think of traditional storytelling like taking a train ride. You travel from station A to station B on a fixed track. Fellini's later films abandon the train entirely. They're more like scuba diving.
Scuba diving.
Yeah, you are dropped into this immersive, floating environment where memories, fears, and fantasies just swim past you simultaneously.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Like in 812, there is a scene where the stressed director is being swarmed by producers at a press conference, and the film simply dissolves into a childhood memory of him being bathed in a farmhouse.
Exactly.
The scenes aren't connected by plot, they're connected by the internal feeling of being overwhelmed and seeking nurture.
He proved you can build a narrative out of raw feelings and symbols. He makes his first color film, Juliet of the Spirits, in 1965, which is deeply steeped in these concepts.
Yeah.
He casts his wife, Julieta, to play a woman dealing with her husband's infidelity by summoning spirits in a seance. He is basically putting the architecture of the anima, the inner feminine personality and the subconscious directly onto the screen.
And he was incredibly open about the fact that his depictions of the past weren't factual. Like in 1973, he releases the Oscar-winning film Amarcord, which is this serio-comic look at his 1930s youth in Rimini.
Right.
He famously said, quote, "It is not memory that dominates my films. I have invented almost everything for the pleasure of being able to recount them."
He proudly embraced the title of a born liar.
A born liar, I love that.
Because he understood a fundamental principle of art. Emotional truth is often far more accurate than a factual truth.
Yeah.
A caricature of a person's face might not be anatomically correct, but it captures their essence better than a photograph ever could.
And this philosophy extended to his worldview during a very dark period in Italian history. During the 1970s, Italy went through the years of lead.
Oh, yeah, that was a rough time.
Yeah, a period of extreme political terrorism, bombings, and kidnappings between far-right and far-left factions. Directors were expected to pick a side and make fiercely political statements. But Fellini remained aggressively apolitical in his art.
He actively opposed authoritarianism and communism, but he never directed an overtly political film. He believed deeply in the, quote, nobility of the individual human being.
Which is a statement in itself.
Absolutely. In a society demanding ideological conformity, choosing to protect the private, weird, internal freedom of the individual was actually a radical stance.
And by trusting his own subjective experience, he influenced an entire generation of auteurs. Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, Tim Burton, David Lynch, they all cite him as a foundational influence.
Oh, without a doubt.
You cannot have David Lynch's bizarre, dreamlike landscapes without Fellini kicking down the door to the subconscious first.
His legacy is massive, shaping everything from modern cinema to the very ways we analyze our own dreams.
His legacy even reaches into your local coffee shop.
Wait, what?
Yeah, there is an incredible detail in our sources about espresso culture. Fellini is credited with popularizing something called the Fellini move, or the Fellini maneuver, in espresso production.
I have never heard of this. How does a film director change coffee?
It involves a spring lever espresso machine. Baristas figured out that if you pull the lever down slightly, let it up and pull it down again, you pre-infuse the coffee puck and extract a much larger volume of espresso.
Okay.
And Fellini featured a barista executing this specific rhythmic move in a bar scene in his 1978 film Orchestra Rehearsal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, coffee aficionados saw the film, adopted the technique, and named it after him.
That perfectly encapsulates his reach, honestly. He gave permission to generations of creators and audiences to trust the strange rhythms of their inner lives.
Right.
He proved that we don't just want cold logic. We want to feel the messy, beautiful, chaotic truth of the human mind.
Fellini passed away in 1993, just one day after celebrating his 50th wedding anniversary to Giulietta.
Tragically, she passed away just 5 months later.
Yeah, but the impact he left behind was staggering. His memorial service was held in Studio 5 at Cinecittà, the massive soundstage that served as his creative home, and an estimated 70,000 people showed up to mourn the grand illusionist.
A fittingly epic farewell for a man who lived on an epic scale, really turning his own neuroses into global mythology.
Right, absolutely.
Hmm.
So, to wrap up this deep dive, we have followed Federico Fellini, from a kid reading Little Nemo to a caricaturist on the bombed-out streets of Rome, all the way to the undisputed maestro of cinema.
Yeah.
He gave us the word paparazzi, he held a mirror up to celebrity culture, and he taught us that our dreams carry as much weight as our waking hours.
And if you consider your own life today, we exist in a modern world that is fiercely obsessed with data. We track our sleep cycles, we demand factual accuracy, we document every mundane, literal moment of our lives on social media as proof that we exist.
So true.
Fellini's legacy is a powerful, radical reminder that there is profound truth in our fantasies. Your imagination isn't just a distraction from reality, it is a vital, essential component of it.
I love that. And I want to leave you with a final challenge to mull over. Fellini kept a meticulously illustrated dream journal for 30 years, and pulling from that basement of his subconscious altered the trajectory of art. If you were to sit down today and script a movie based entirely on the last dream you can remember, what kind of movie would it be? And more importantly, what would those bizarre floating symbols reveal about you?
Would it be a comedy? A tragedy? Or something perfectly, beautifully confused?
Sometimes raising a glass to the confusion is the only way to find the masterpiece. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay insanely curious, and we'll catch you next time.